Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. This is your teacher Rabia Alam. I hope that you all will be doing good and staying safe. Today the topic we are going to cover is the stylistic features at the level of sentence. That what are its the language description or the stylistic features that are present at the level of sentences. How writers or poets can style their sentences or manipulate the words, or we can say use devices or stylistic features to enhance the expression of their feelings, their ideas, how they try to make their we can say writings or poetry attractive, how certain features can contribute to the expression of idea, feelings, emotions, how writers or poets or any person who wants to convey his idea can use certain structures to express himself, and how certain sentence structure can carry different types of meanings, and how meanings can be manipulated with the use of certain features in sentences. Style in language description at the level of sentence. The syntactic level is concerned with the arrangement of words in a sentence, that how writers and poets can manipulate the arrangement of words, and how this arrangement of words can contribute towards the meanings, toward the ideas that are being conveyed. It also attempts to describe how these elements function in a sentence, that when we have to arrange certain words, what are the ways they can carry different stylistic coloring, how they can function in a sentence. It describes the rules of positioning of words in sentences, and how writers can or poets can deliberately change these rules, and how they can deviate from the rules of a language, and how these deviation can describe the style of a certain writer or poet. It involves rules of positioning of elements in a sentence, such as noun, verbs, adverbs, or uh, adjectives, prepositions, pronouns, that writers and poets or the language users can basically position these elements, and the positioning can be made on the basis of the rules. If a writer has to express his uh, research, however, a poet can deliberately deviate from the rules and can uh, vary the position of elements, and thus can contribute to the stylistic features of that certain sentence. Basically, whenever writers or poets give stylistic coloring to their sentences, they are deviating from the rules that basically position, or we can say the certain verbs, nouns, pronouns, adverbs, adjectives in a sentence. These deviations basically are based on certain patterns or certain features of style. First one is the reduction of sentence pattern, that lies in the deliberate omission of obligatory elements of the sentence structure. These are basically the ways in which the writers or the poets deliberately omit a part of a sentence, or a compulsory element of a sentence structure, and in doing so, they are basically trying to uh, either allowing the reader or the listener to work up their imagination, or they understand that the reader or the listener can understand it from the context or from the previous conversation or previous part of poetry or writing. So these features that contribute to the reduction of sentence structures or sentence pattern include ellipses, aposiopesis, nominative sentences, incomplete sentences, and ascendant tone. Next, the deviations the writer or poet can do can be based on the redundancy of the sentence pattern. These are basically the repetitions, the redundancy of a sentence structure. The writers or poets basically can add some elements or can deliberately repeat them. These are basically for the can be for expressing an idea again and again or for emphasizing an idea. These features basically describe either the feelings of the poet or the writer or his nervousness or how much he wants to express an idea, how he wants the reader or the speaker to understand that this is important for the writer or the poet. The stylistic elements that can be used for redundancy in a sentence structure are repetition, enumeration, polysyndeton, emphatic construction, parenthetical clauses or sentences. These elements, or we can say stylistic devices, can be used by the writers or poets to repeat any item in a sentence or in a sentence structure. Then is the violation of grammatically fixed word order within a sentence. Or a writer or poet can basically do deliberate isolation of some part of sentence that they basically violate the grammatically fixed word order. For example, the word order of English is subject plus verb plus object. However, they can deliberately violate these rules, and sometimes they can deliberately isolate a certain part of a sentence from the other sentence. So these are the ways through which the writers or the poets can basically manipulate the parts of sentences to describe their certain style. For the violation of grammatically fixed word orders or for this isolation, they can use the stylistic devices like stylistic inversion, stylistic syntactical split. They can use suspense and detachment. Writers and poets can adopt the different arrangement of sentences in sequence, and through this they can achieve a stylistic effect. For this, they can use the stylistic devices of parallelism, chiasmus. So through this, they basically arrange sentence in a certain order, in a certain sequence, and that can bring a stylistic effect to the writing or to the poetry. All of these deviations from stylistically unmarked sentence patterns may acquire stylistic connotation. These are the ways the writers and the poets can deviate through the standard syntactic structures and syntactic patterns, and through this they can achieve stylistic effect, and through this they can make their writings or the poetry more expressive, more effective, and this helps them to express themselves more in a much better way. First of all, we will describe the stylistic properties of syntactic construction based on the reduction of sentence structure, that how writers and poets can reduce a part of a sentence structure or can bring reduction, and through this they can achieve a stylistic effect. First of the stylistic devices through which the writers or the poets can deliberate bring reduction in syntactic structure is the ellipsis. It is the absence of one or both principal parts, that is either the subject or the predicate, in a syntactic structure. The writer or the poet deliberately omits either subject or predicate, or sometimes both of these in a syntactic structure. It can reproduce colloquial speech. It can give the effect of conversational, or we can say more of an informal speech, and can impart brevity, quick tempo, and emotional tension to the author's narrative. That the writer can basically give, we can say, author or the writer or the poet can express his emotional tension, his tempo, his brevity, or we can say the conversation way, in the way he conversate, or in the way that he uses the speech in his daily life, and can bring a true to life experience to the author's narrative. For example, if we consider this example, he smiled again. Fine, where were you last Friday evening? I had dinner with some friends. I said, where? Southport. And after that had a drink. He has omit I had a drink in the bar of Castle Hotel and went to bed. Alone? That's right. What time? I don't know. Somewhere between 11:30 and midnight. What time did you had breakfast? Here he has admitted I had breakfast at 8 o'clock. He has missed a lot of the part in the fifth sentence that had a drink in the bar of Castle Hotel and went to bed. I had been omitted. Here in the last sentence, I had the breakfast at 8 o'clock. Only he has written only 8 o'clock. He has showing the nervousness of the speakers, and how the speaker who is being questioned is either nervous or he is providing just phrase answers in phrases. So through this the writer or the poet can describe his quick tempo, his emotional narrative in his writings. For a reduction in sentence structure, the writers can use nominative sentences. These are one-member sentences with only a noun or a prepositional noun phrase or an adverb. These only have one principal part, with or word without words modifying it. That these can only be nouns, or they can be prepositional noun phrases, or they can have they can be adverbs, but these are only one part sentences. For example, jokes. As a writer, that's your main trouble. You don't want to recognize it. Tragedy. Plain tragedy. Historical tragedy. No hope, the end. He has explained tragedy as a sentence. He is treating tragedy, plain tragedy, historical tragedy, and jokes as a sentence. He is conveying the way he is using only one member sentence, that is, he is using tragedy. He is using only nouns in these sentences. So the writers uh, the writers or the poets can basically want to emphasize on a certain aspect or a certain idea, and these are the way they can express these the importance of an idea, so they can use nominative sentences. Then are the incomplete sentences. These are characterized by absence of auxiliary elements of the sentences, that they do not have auxiliary verbs, articles, prepositions, or conjunction. That is the glue through which the content words are, we can say, joined in a, or we can say laid out in a sentence. These are missing. These are often dropped off in informal oral communication. For example, has Dr. Thurmer written to your parents yet? He said he was going to write them Monday. He has omitted on, the preposition on in he said that is also missing. The he said that he was going to write them on Monday. So the preposition on is also missing. That these basically are the way that people normally talk in their daily life. Then is aposiopesis. It is the deliberate failure to complete a sentence. It is caused by the influx of senses, consideration of time. One notices that she or he has given out a secret, or unwillingness to proceed, inability or unwillingness to finish the utterance. That sometimes when we are talking, we come across some feelings, or we can say some senses, or we notice that we had not wanted to tell something to others. In certain we can say situation, we come across such we can say events that we do not want to continue. So the writer or the poet or the speaker basically breaks the narrative, that he deliberately fails to complete the sentence. It is used in dialogue mostly. So in other forms of narrative, imitating spontaneous oral speech, when a writer wants to express that there is conversation going on, so he can use this stylistic device. It reflects the emotional state of speaker, or a sentence may be broken because the speaker's emotion prevent them from finishing it. That the writer or the we can say writer or poet or the speaker basically expresses that he has overcome a great, or we can say there is an influx of some senses, some emotions, some feelings, and these feelings and emotions do not allow the speaker to continue the conversation or to complete the utterance. So he breaks the narration, or he deliberately uh, leaves the conversation incomplete. For example, if we consider the conversation from Period Price by Joyce Carey, do you think I am a selfish brute? Oh, of course not, Frank. You know I don't. You have been most considerate from the beginning. You have done your best to be fair to everyone. Yes, but especially to myself, the mummy's boy. Why do you mean? Oh, I never said. So here, the mummy's boy, the term mummy's boy, the person who was the other person who was not Frank, he basically tries, he basically interprets the first part of the sentence by the Frank, and he says, "Why do you mean?" And then he abruptly stops. That what had the Frank said? The mummy's boy? I never said that sentence. So here the speaker has been interrupted by the conversation going on, and that conversation might have told the person that he has given any information that he didn't want to give, or the listener is basically implying something. So in these situations, the speaker can basically halt in a conversation, and he can deliberately stop the conversation. Then is the ascendant tone. It is the omission of conjunctions that ordinarily join coordinate clauses or words. It is the deliberate avoidance of conjunction that the writer, poet, or the speaker deliberately avoids using the conjunctions to connect sentences, clauses, or phrases or words. It can have a rhythmical arrangement, usually making the narrative layered, energetic, dynamic, and tense. For example, there was a long time ago. She and her brothers and sisters were all grown up. Her mother was dead. They do not have used the and her mother was dead. In the next example, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, an empty stream, a great silence, an impenetrable forest. The air was thick, warm, heavy, sluggish. The writer has not used a single, we can say, conjunction, because he wants that each and every phrase must be given the importance, must be, as there is a continuity, there is a rhythm in the sentence. So in these ways, the writers can emphasize the feelings they want to convey. Then are the stylistic properties of syntactic construction based on the redundancy of the sentence structure. That the writers and poets, how they can use certain repetitions, and how through these repetitions they can bring a stylistic effect in their writings or poetry. First is the repetition. It is the reiteration of same word or phrase to lay an emphatic stress on certain part of sentences that the writer or the poet reiterates, that is, repeats a same word or phrase, and as in to lay stress on something, that he want to emphasize something, that this is important. It is widely employed by in a colloquial speech as well as in poetry, imaginative prose, and emotional public speeches. The element repeated attract the reader's attention as being the most important. When someone is repeating again and again and again, the listener can understand that this is very important that they are repeating it again and again. In oral communication, it is used when the speaker is under the stress of strong emotion. Then it shows the excited state, or it shows the excited state of mind of the speaker. That when the speaker wants the listener to listen to him carefully, and he wants to express something, or he wants that he is going through a strong emotions, he wants the listener to pay attention. For example, Ernest Hemingway has told in this conversation, "Why would you do anything, something for me now? I would do anything for you. So, would you please, 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 please stop talking?" That he wants the listener to please stop talking, and he has emphasized again and again and again that please, please, please. Then his mind as cannot take that much talking, and he wants the listener to please stop talking. Then there are types of repetition. First one is the ordinary repetition. It is the repetition of a word in close succession, that they can be closely associated, that they can be in the same phrase or in a clause or within a same sentence. For example, Minnie remained where she was, sitting quite still, her eyes fixed on the young man's averted face. She was happy, happy, happy. The long day ripened and ripened, perfection after perfection. So the repetitions are in close succession. Then is apiphora. It is the end of successive sentences are being repeated. That the sentences that are uh, in close association or are successive sentences, the words at the end are repeated. Its function is to stress the final words of a sentence, that the writer or the poet or the speaker wants to stress something and stress on the final words of the sentence. For example, thing was a bit of a fraud. Yes, really, he decided, rather a fraud. That he wants the listener to understand that he is talking about the fraud, not about anything else. Then is anadiplosis, or we can say it is the catch repetition, that a device in which the last word or the phrase of one clause, sentence, or line is repeated at the beginning of the next. That it creates a connection that the last part of the first sentence is being repeated at the beginning of the second sentence. They laughed. They laughed because he could not find Tommy Flynn. Everybody against him, no one to help. Oh, if only he could find just one who would help him. They laughed. The last part is laugh. Then they laughed because, and then the sentence carries on. So in this way, they are basically repeating the last word or phrase of a sentence in the beginning of the next sentence. Then is the framing or ring repetition. In this repetition, the opening word or phrase is repeated at the end of the sentence or a group of sentences. That the same word that is used at the beginning of a sentence is repeated at the end of the sentence. The function of framing is to elucidate the notion mentioned in the beginning of the sentence, that the writer, poet, or the speaker wants to elucidate the we can say the beginning, the notion, the idea that has been expressed in the beginning of the sentence. Between the two appearances of the repeated units, there comes a developing middle part, which explains or clarifies what was introduced in the beginning, so that by the time it is used for the second time, its meanings have been concretized and specified. So it is like developing a sentence structure, that first the writer or the poet describes a word, and then the sentences develop into a certain notion or idea. At the end, it clarifies, it specifies the idea that has been described at the beginning. For example, obviously this is a streptococcal infection. Obviously that he knew, but somehow he was in doubt. But after the middle part, he is now sure that obviously it is a streptococcal infection. Then is the chain repetition. It is the combination of catch repetitions that the it creates an effect of developing action. That certain the word that the a word is repeated, and then it we can say creates an effect of developing action that is being gradually intensified. For example, a smile would come into Mr. Pickwick's face. The smile extended into laugh. The laugh into roar. The roar became general. So smile to laugh and then laugh to roar. There is a gradual intensification, and this is the function of catch repetition. Then is enumeration, that it is the repetition of homogeneous parts of the sentence, that the part of the sentences that are somehow homogeneous, that are describe a homogeneity, that is being of a same genus or same we can say uh, family, same object, same type of objects, and it is aimed at emphasizing the whole utterance, that it is used that we want to express our emphasis, or we want to stress on the complete utterance. For example, he had come near quietly, and he leaned over the wire fence that protected her flower gardens from cattle and dogs and chickens. He could have said that from animals, but no, he has expressed cattle and dogs and chickens. So he has basically emphasized that these are the certain things from which she has made a wire fence to avoid coming them, or we can say protected them from certain animals. Then is the polysyndeton. It is the repetition of conjunctions in close succession, which are used to connect sentences, clauses, words, and make the utterances more rhythmical. That sometimes we completely omit the conjunctions. However, in polysyndeton, we repeat the conjunctions again and again and again to create a rhythm. For example, as Crane has said, in most cases, we can say the in when we say about the polysyndeton, conjunction and is repeated almost. The horizon narrowed and widened, and dipped and rose, and at all time its edge was jagged with the waves that seemed thrust up in points like rocks. So the horizon narrowed and widened and dipped and rose, and at all time its edge was jagged with waves that seemed thrust up and points like rocks. So, and the repetition of and. Then we can see the repetition of or in Gilman, that I know a little of the principle of design, and I know this thing was not arranged on any law of radiation or alternation or repetition or symmetry or anything else that I ever heard of. So in this way, the writer or the poet can create rhythm in his writing or poetry. Then are the emphatic construction, that these are the construction that are used to intensify any member of a sentence, giving it more prominence. That Sometimes we have heard that some speakers say, I do know about it. Why these members, for example, the emphatic construction do, it is somebody, something, who, that, or it is by, with, through, something, that, it is then that. So we have often heard the sentence like, it was then that Barn had his first glimpse of the little cloaked man in a yellow hat. It was the horses he loved. He could have said that he loved horses. No, he has expressed that it was the horses he loved. He spoke a little to the jockeys, that he came to the certain place only for the horses because he loved them. So these are the ways we can express, or we can say, we can stress on anything, and we want to express that these things are more important. Then is the parenthesis that sometimes we have often seen in written or poetry, that a word or a phrase or a clause is put into sentences which is grammatically complete without it. That the insertion, it was not necessary. It was for example, for deliberate reference, or for any reason. Sometimes the writer thinks that the reader may not know this, or he wants to give some example so that the reader can understand it better. For example, in Calorman, storytelling is a thing you are taught, just as English boys and girls are taught essay writing. The difference is that people want to hear the stories, whether I never heard of anyone who wanted to read the essay. So the sentence or phrase, whether the stories are made up or are true or made up, this part is not compulsory, is not needed, is not necessary. However, he wants to express something. He wants to deliberately add it because he thinks that this is the way he can express himself. So these are the ways the writers and the poets can add something in the sentence structure. Then are the stylistic properties that are made on the violation of grammatically fixed word orders. First one is the inversion, that the writers and the poets can deliberately invert the syntactic structure, and they can reverse the normal order of the words and the phrases in a sentence. For example, the placing of an adjective after the noun, it modifies the form divine rather than the divine form, or a verb that can be placed before its subject, came the dawn rather than the dawn came. So, or a noun that can precede its preposition, that words between rather than between words. So it is the way it can demand the it can the writers or the poets can complete the demand of emphasis, stress, and also the poets can we can say satisfy the metrical or rhythmic, we can say, necessities of poetry. So these are the ways the writers and the poets can deliberately change the way in the words or phrases in a sentence are placed, either for stressing, or they can use it for meter and for rhythm. For example, the following pattern of stylistical inversions are most frequently used in English prose and poetry. The object is placed at the beginning of the sentence. That the object that is being the sentence in English sentence structure, sub object is at the end. However, the in an inversion, the object can be placed at the beginning of a sentence. For example, talent Mr. Macabre has, capital Mr. Macabre has not. The attribute is placed after the word it modifies. That, for example, once upon a midnight dreary. So Here, the attribute is being placed after the word it modifies. However, in the normal sentence structure, the attribute is placed before the word it modifies. Then is the predicate is placed before the subject. However, the normal sentence structure is the subject is placed before the predicate. A good generous prayer it was, rather than it was a good generous prayer. Then is the adverbial modifier is placed at the beginning of the sentence. That, for example, we've all heard, often they came very close and stared at the man with black bead-like eyes. Or second example is, out of a dark and soft-seated limousine, I am ushered into a bright room filled with many people. Then both modifier and predicate stand before the subject. She braved it for a moment or two with an eye full of love and stubbornness, and murmured a phrase or two vaguely of General Pinky. But at length down went her head, and out came the truth and tears. So here the modifier and the predicate are both before the subject. However, in the general case, or we can say in the standard form, the predicate and the modifier are always placed after the subject. Then is the separation or syntactical split. It is the splitting of a noun phrase by the attribute adjunct, which is removed from the word it modifies. That is, the word is basically, you can say, the attribute adjunct is split it from the noun phrase. That the noun phrase is split into two parts, the noun and the attribute. It syntactical split is used to emphasize this phrase which was separated. That when we want to emphasize a syntactical phrase, we basically use a syntactic split. He has never seen the truth before about anything. Rather than he had never seen the truth about anything before. So here the writer want to emphasize about anything. So he has splitted that from the noun phrase. Detachment. It is a separation of a secondary part of sentence with the aim of emphasizing it. That we basically separate a syntactical, we can say, secondary part of a sentence when we want to emphasize it. In some cases, the part of sentences are separated from other members with which they are grammatically and logically connected. That we basically separate certain part of sentences that are grammatically and logically connected, but for what? For emphasizing them, for stressing them. For example, Mrs. Reimer was a tall woman, big boned. Big boned is basically logically connected with tall woman. However, that he wanted to express the we can say emphasize this thing, so he had uh, basically separated this secondary part. Then is the stylistic effects that can be achieved through the peculiar arrangements of said stylistic or syntactic construction in the sequence. First one is the parallelism. It is the repetition of similar syntactic structures in close proximity. That we basically repeat similar syntactic structures in close proximity. It can be of two types, partial or complete. The complete parallelism is observed when the syntactical pattern of sentence that follows is completely identical to the preceding one. That we basically repeat the complete syntactical construction. Then is the partial parallelism is considered when either the beginning or the end of several neighboring sentences is structurally similar. That the structure of these sentences, either in the beginning or the ending of many sentences that are neighboring sentences, is similar. For example, I don't know why I should write this. I don't want to. I don't feel able. The beginning, I don't, is basically being repeated and the structure is completely similar. Then as the chiasmus. It is the kind of parallelism where the word order of the sentence or clause that follows becomes inverted. The main stylistic function of chiasmus is to emphasize a part of the utterance to break the rhythm and monotony of the parallelism. That it is basically the repetition, or we can say the parallelism, where the word order of the sentence become inverted. That is, the sentence first one is sentence has a structure, but the second sentence or the parallel sentence has an inverted sentence structure. Here the writers or poets basically want to break the monotony or sometimes the rhythm that can be boring to the listener or to the reader, so that sentence or the parallel sentence is inverted so that the right reader or the listener do not get bored. For example, love's fire heats water. Water cools not love. Love is at the end in the second sentence how it is the beginning, and same is the water that is at the end of the first phrase then is the at the beginning of the second phrase. In his face divine compassion visibly appeared, love without end and without mere grace. Here without end, love without end, subject is at the beginning, however, and without mere grace, grace is at the end. So here the sentence structure has been inverted. That was all for the syntactical structure. Thank you very much.